Rob, it's working on one, not working on the other. Robbie Gold. We'll be back. There we go. Now we're moving and grooving. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world, we got Ristau's Roundtable live Q&A / updates on the real estate and mortgage market. Reality of it is, if you don't know or haven't heard, there's been some news in the real estate sector, some lawsuits, some class actions, and all that good stuff. And reality of it is the National Association of Realtors has came out and said, here's what we're willing to do. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We'll give a few people some time to kind of get in here and take a look and see what's going on. But reality of it is, what up, Sharon? Just checking things out, living life one day at a time. Reality of it is this. NAR basically has came out and said, look, we're going to make some changes, and we also want to basically settle on behalf of the realtor party that does less than $2 billion in transactions a year. So here are the highlights. NAR agrees to pay $418 million over 4 years, okay, to settle the suits. This is basically stopping all current suits and any future suits against the realtor party that does less than $2 billion in transactions in 2022, which is most companies, excluding Home Service of America, because Warren Buffett and their team are doing their own thing on the side. So what does this really mean? NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing and believes that fair and cooperative compensation that allows proper representation by parties, a transaction in the best interest of all. I think that's the way it's always been. I think there's just been people just either didn't know you can negotiate at the end of the day, and there's no guarantee anymore. So here's what's happening. There's an MLS where all agents will put listings into the system that will basically then take those listings and they would get them all over the internet in a nutshell. Inside that MLS, there was a broker compensation agreement. Basically says, I'm going to give a broker or buyer or an agent who brings me a buyer a commission that the seller would pay. Okay. Long story short, what they're basically are saying now is that part of the MLS is going to go away, right? So what's going to happen now is buyers and buyers agents are going to have to work on their agreements. They're going to basically have to come to a meeting of the minds, and the buyer is going to have to figure out how they're going to be paying for the representation that they want. Okay. Buyers that are going to be represented by an agent, which 100% I'd recommend you never going into this without an agent, you're going to have a couple options. You're going to have option A to basically pay your buyer directly out of your savings accounts or down payments and all of that. Or option B, the buyer's agent is going to work with the seller and the listing agent to negotiate on behalf to get that paid by the seller, like it is kind of currently now, right? So the good news is, I think for the industry is it's going to put everything front and center, which is number one. Super, super high end priority, in my opinion, is you want to make sure everything is front and center. It already should have been. If you didn't have these conversations up front, how you get paid as an agent, this is your time as an agent to learn how to basically make sure everybody understands what's going to happen and what's going on. All right. The reality of it is this. Buyers are going to have to now either say, A, I'm going to have a buyer's agent help represent me to help look out for my fiduciary duty, right? Which, listen, as a buyer, you do not want to go walk into a listing and have a listing agent help you. And I'll tell you why. It is impossible to give your fiduciary duty to two separate parties. That is like going into a divorce and, let's just use an analogy, your wife's attorney. Who's he or she supposed to help? The wife. So you don't want to walk into your biggest transaction in the history with now any representation of somebody fighting for your best interest, because the reality of it is this is by far your biggest asset you're probably ever going to buy is your home. And so you want to have representation there. Now, there is an agreement. It's called a buyer-broker agreement that's been used for many, many years. A lot of agents never did it because they just didn't either feel comfortable talking about it, or B, they just felt like it wasn't something that the buyer should know about, which is totally wrong. As a company, and that what we do, we train our agents to go over the buyer rep agreement. It talks about what our job is as an agent to you. It talks about your job. I don't even know if most buyers know that they actually have a job in this transaction too. right? You can't just basically say, hey, I want you to help represent me, and then, by the way, I'm just going to not ever communicate with you. You actually have a job as well. And this buyer broker agreement will break down exactly what happens. There's options in there for mutual agreement that needs to have mutual agreement to separate, or unilateral, which basically means if the buyer's not happy with me as their agent, they can walk away with no problem at all, which is how most of the buyer rep agreements are set up. And there's a time frame and a price range and all that kind of good stuff that's in there, as well as how, if we have to look at these 10 properties and these 5 seller concessions are on the table and these 5 they're not, what would you like to do, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer? Right? You now have those options, and those conversations need to be done up front. So good news. I think it's actually good for the industry. I think it's going to make sure that the experience and the experience the consumer is going to receive moving forward will be a lot higher, because if you're not a skill-based agent in this industry, and you basically don't know contracts, you don't know disclosures, you don't know forms, you don't know negotiations, this industry is not going to play very fair. And the good news about it is that's going to make sure that the bar gets raised in our industry as agents. That's good. As a broker, an owner of a brokerage, I want you to know we want to raise the bar. We do not want the experience for the consumer to be super low. We want it to be super high, and we want it to be something that they would refer all their friends and families to. So if you're not working on your skill set right now, agents, this is your time to definitely do that. Quick plug. We have Agent Catapult launching to this Thursday for Seller Series. Agents, if you need training, we're definitely here to help you out with that for sure, because not working on your skill set right now is a disaster for agents. It just is. Now, people might ask, what do we see the long-term results of this? I don't know the whole long-term results yet. I'm never the first person to go out there on camera and talk about something. There's still a lot of what ifs here, right? The judge still needs to approve this. It's not been approved yet, right? There's also timeline says this is going to start as of July 1st. Well, will the CAR contract be changed? Will the buyer broker agreement be changed based off how it is right now? Will we have an update before July 1st? My gut says there might be an update before that, right? So I still think there's some things that need to kind of settle in and figure out how that's going to look. And then reality of it is, how do the consumers, the sellers and buyers, like the new rules? I do think it's better for the industry, but I do think there's going to be a lot of first-time buyers that don't have the funds to pay for an agent. And so the question will become is if or when will it happen where Fannie, Freddie, and FHA basically say, you know what, you can finance your buyer's agent commission. Maybe that happens. Maybe it doesn't. Still not on the table yet, right? So there's lots of moving pieces right now for the industry, and I don't know we're going to see those today or tomorrow or next week. But I will tell you, our thumb is definitely on the pulse of what's going on in the industry. We have been in meetings on this. And the reality of it is we want to make sure you, the consumer, is protected, and the agents know what their expectations are to be a top agent in the industry. So at the end of the day, this is definitely pushing everybody's cards in, cards on the table, which I think is really, really good for our industry. So let's look, see if we have any questions from anybody that want to get answered today. But I'm definitely more than happy to answer any questions on this, basically in general, because it is going to be something that's going to be talked about with the agents or in our industry for a while. But we just want to make sure everybody knows that this should have always happened, just so you know. So there's no additional questions today. I will leave the video at that, but I just want to make sure I give you up to date with this stuff. And as new developments come out, I will discuss more and more about this in general. But one thing I will tell everybody is please do never buy a property without representation. You're only hurting yourself. Okay. At the end of the day, you don't want to go in and have one person represent 2 people. That's going to be another huge lawsuit when buyers go and say, I wasn't feeling like I had my best interest at hand. And guess what? It's going to happen. So don't do that. Please work with a real estate broker who understands the market, understands the negotiations, understands the contract, and is going to fight for you. As always, thank you for everyone who tuned in. I really appreciate the 25 of you that joined on. If you have any questions on the market, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to answer those for you.